Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk.
Hello, everyone. Actually, I'm Roger Chen from the University of San Francisco and also the Center for Business Studies and Innovation in Asia Pacific, and short for USF CBSI Asia Pacific. So, Alfred, would you please, first of all, I want to thank you for supporting us to join this program. And would you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for inviting me. And this is my honor, and really it's a privilege to be here today. And thanks Heister and thanks Tai to actually have me speak today. I think the last time I actually spoke at a Heister event was maybe 22 years ago, which Heister was just founded. I think I went to a dinner in Cupertino, and I spoke at the dinner. It was very well attended, and so I have extremely fond memories. And it's been a long time, and so thankful to be back. So I was born in Hong Kong, and I was graduated from the University of San Francisco with a computer science degree. And then I went to UC Davis for my graduate studies. And then I got my master's degree from them. And then halfway through my PhD program, I quit and I went to work for Sun. I was at Sun for about just under 9 years. And I founded my own company called BEA Systems. BEA was a very successful venture. So we went public in 4 years and pivoted the company into the web space in the late 90s and reached $58 billion market cap, and eventually got to just under $2 billion in revenue and sold to Oracle for $9 billion, just under $9 billion during the financial crisis. And then I've done other companies and been very active in investing in the early stage company for the past decade plus. And so about 5 years ago, I started a firm with two other partners focusing on seed stage investment in infrastructure technology. So that's what I've been very focused on in the past few years. I'm having a grand time. This is like 2000 all over again for this AI era. So very thankful to be here. Yeah.
AI, business process software, sustainability, etc.
My first question relates to what you're doing, because you're the founding member of the Raise Capital, and it's very active, great investors. And also, obviously, we understand during this AI age, there's a lot of discussion about the opportunities. So from that perspective, what is your investment thesis? And in other words, what kind of startups attract your your VC?
Actually, technically, my journey into what we're doing now has never changed. I've been working on the software stack above the operating system all the way up to the application. That's I coined it middleware in the mid-1990s, and that's by and large still what I do. Obviously, it mutated from very structured data, relational databases, and distributed transaction processing into the web, then into mobile, and into well-connected social kind of environment. Now is mutated into using unstructured data to train and large language models, and then run and create inferences from those models, and now create applications. So we are very focused on creating the next generation of that infrastructure stack. So I think our thesis is uniquely, it's identifying the marketplace that we constantly are evolving and creating an architecture, and then we're finding companies that fits into that block. That's what we do. In early stage, seed stage. So a lot of people do pre-seed, which is no software. Generally, our sweet spot is it's a going concern, and we can see that it fits into the block. That's what we focus on.
Okay, maybe can you elaborate a little bit? Because I think in your LinkedIn post, you specifically mentioned about this middleware segment presents a huge opportunities because of the AI. Could you elaborate?
Sure.
Because I assume some audience, they are entrepreneurs, they're interested in your view about the opportunities in that particular segment.
Actually, interesting enough, a couple of weeks ago, I was on a long segment on CNBC after the market closed to talk about how is the market really evolving, what's really going to happen with this AI hype. So if you look at where we are now, we're finally seeing, you see, like everybody knows, ChatGPT 4, ChatGPT 4.0. We're starting for the first time we see like 4.0 has close to 2 billion parameters in there. So which is why the difference when you go from 3.5 to 4, all of a sudden you see, wow, it seems a lot more intelligent. But if you look at the type of applications now, what we're doing, most of them, they're like agents, they're co-pilots. Very much is conversational based because we're training NLP through the large language. So they are like question and answers, and it's kind of in chat format. But real business application are not chat based; they're process based. So there's a process for human resources. There's a process for building an ERP. There's a process for logistics. There's a process for the telco to issue, provision telephone number to bill you. So really where this is evolving to is how do we actually get the neural network to now think like human and help you on the process. And if you think like over the past 5, 6, 7 decades, computers really only allow us to do one thing. We're taking a form, like a piece of paper with fields on it. We are plugging the things in the field and we're passing the form around. We still do that today. So if you actually took an Uber to here, you will have to tell it where you are, where you're going, sometimes given some instructions, and then look, right? And you're submitting the form. I think for the first time, we see light. We don't need the form anymore. That means everything that we have seen, every app that we use on our phone, every app that we use on the web, every app that we use at work, likely will be tossed out, and we will have a very process-driven and naturally adhere to the way that we do things and can think like human, evolve like human, improve like human type of applications. So I'm very focused on building this development and deployment stack to allow the neural network to enable this new generation application building. So I'm looking for very specific companies that can fill the pieces. So, and I don't have to be right, for the entire stack. I just have to be right, hitting a few of the key companies, but yet the stack is generally in the right kind of vicinity, then we will win. So that's really what I'm doing, yeah.
AI opportunities in business process software segment.
That's very interesting. And also relating to that, because in another of your posts, actually, it's very interesting. You said a recent study argues that ChatGPT needs to drink, quote unquote, about 500 millimeter bottles of waters for every 20 to 50 questions and answers. I didn't realize before reading your post, ChatGPT quote, drink so much water to do this work. But my actually real question is, does that mean AI, of course, creates a lot of challenges for this, environmental sustainability issues, as well as the innovation opportunities in that space?
Actually, there's a very interesting statistics. I don't know if any of you actually follow energy studies. I do. Actually, I spoke at a conference called One Earth, which is a green conference 2 months ago. So kind of preparing into going to the conference, I was kind of surprised they invited me, really kind of like a software AI stack guy, to go speak in a conference to save the planet Earth. And then I was looking at the International Energy Agency's number, right? And they're estimating how much electricity we're actually using in AI aggregately. And then, you kind of have to look at, actually, I don't look at just what we're using for the H100, A100s, and the competitor, MI400X, and that related type, superscalar stack. I'm actually looking at how much those things are now driving a data center use of energy, right? It's amazing. The number will say in less than 2 years, so before we enter into 2027, we'll be consuming more than 10,000 trillion watts per hour of electricity. So just to put this in perspective, right? That will equate to, or maybe slightly over, what Germany, with 83 million people, is consuming. So AI will consume, just AI in aggregate in data center, will be consuming more energy than all of Germany, with all the 83 million people, than them, on an hourly basis. This is a very frightening thing. So you can almost look at in 2030, likely it will match or exceed any country in terms of consumption, just on the data center itself. But yet, us techie, I assume most of us in this room here, we don't think about this stuff, right? We just say, don't worry, we would just either dig a bigger hole, somewhere in Saudi Arabia, or we harness, more solar, and they'll be all okay. But the destruction we're doing to the earth is actually quite serious. So when I got on the stage at One Earth, I thought, oh my God, I'm the bad guy, right, in the conference. So what do I say? Can I please these people so they think we're conscious? So this is actually what I honestly believe. So I think for the longest time, everything can only be fixed if you have data, right? I'm a very data-driven person. I think our world has become a very data-driven person. Everything is very data-driven. But yet in energy, we're terrible at it. So we don't really measure the data of energy use. We only measure the energy uses because of cost. So moving to places that electricity is cheaper. Like you look at all the crypto mining people, they constantly are moving because they're looking at hydro, they're looking at different things because they're looking at lower costs. But we're not really looking at the full picture about what damage is doing to the environment itself. So how do you fix it? It's actually quite simple. Because historically, up to this point, we don't build any of that in our software stack. From the operating system up, from even the microcode, all the way very up to the application. There's no such thing as energy consciousness in this program. This time, we must. As we're building the stack out, the bottom of the system software, people are building specific operating systems to operate the next generation of neural network-driven applications. All the way to all the security software, the code generation, the operation software, definitely the application, have to be energy conscious. That's the only way we can fix this problem, and use AIs to curb it. For most of the time, I don't know how many of you sin like I do, we don't turn our computer off at night, do we, right? It's idling, and we're not using the resources either. So we don't really do edge computing to a point where we can recycle the resources, so we can reduce the compute use and also hence reducing the energy use. Those are the kind of things I think humans literally is incapable of. We must have really, I would say, resources that never get tired, which is the AI part of it, to help us do some of these things. I think the opportunity is now we can align green tech, energy tech, alongside with AI as we are progressing so quickly is to solve this problem at the same time. But in these drivers, obviously, I think the people that in the energy field are extraordinarily committed to leverage this time around. So I think there's hope.
So it's interesting. Basically, it's the AI is the cause as well as the solution.
It has to be. It has to be. Because depending on human alone, we know that we didn't get there for all this time. So we have to use a different method. Yeah.
Okay, any questions, actually follow-up questions, along this kind of a line from the audience you would like to kind of ask?
So how can AI solve this problem? Multi-convention is like hardware problem, right?
So think about, let's say I'm hypothetically, if you look at, like, I'm building a new superscalar center. So the first thing you have to do is to say, okay, how do we recycle compute, right? So how do we share? So we have done some tenancy type, sharing technology when we move things to cloud. So that actually has helped us. But if you look at the open capacity planning in cloud, because we're always afraid there's a crunch and we don't have those capacity available, because we just don't have the technology to be able to predict, right? Predict is the hardest historically. So what were we doing to try to predict? Over time, we were using old school machine learning, rules-based. Finally, we have a very, very smart thing that constantly are mutating and talking to each one of the agents. So you can put agents on each one of the operating system, on each one of the machine inside the data center. So you will know, well, how do I reduce that overcapacity to a point where now you're really seeing energy efficiency? The other thing is timing, right? So some of the things, not all the things you have to do at the same time, but nobody wants to wait. So sometimes we're wasteful, very wasteful. We're in a very wasteful world. How do we reduce the wastefulness has to be driven also now by very smart scheduling. We can almost understand, think about how an operating system is written. It's a contiguous code. There's no smartness in there. So it knows how to operate all the devices, the CPU, and all the things it's hooked up to. But it doesn't really think. Now we have a thinking machine inside. This is obviously software we have to invent, but it hasn't been invented yet. But I think we will get there. So we have software that's so smart, it really literally understands to say, well, now if we do this one other thing, instead of doing it now versus doing it, we can punt it, for maybe 20 minutes, we can have saved the Earth this much. There's no such parameters, right? If we know the parameters how to measure, we'll be able to save it. That's kind of, I see where the world's moving to. And I've seen work now in deep level code that people are starting to do these kind of things because of costs. Soon, I think cost will be equated to the damage that we do. And I think this will be slowly, we'll be ratcheting towards this direction. And then, by the way, and then the government will have to step in the mandate. Some of this have to be through regulation to say, if this is this wasteful. So far, nobody's stopping it yet, right? You look at people building these huge super scale center in Texas and other places. No one's going in and say, you can only use this much energy because it's such an advanced thing that's is driving so much new money. Nobody's stopping anything. At some point in time, they will have to step in and say, come on, okay? So how can you optimize? And they'll have to regulate it. This is something they will have to do.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Because I saw, okay, yeah.
So when you think about investing in opportunities, you mentioned business processes being where you're really looking. Are you especially interested in general AI, who, these systems have the ability to basically address a number of business processes at once, or more specific, hyper-tailored? Where do you think it's heading?
Why AI will reinvent business process software space.
So I'm going to share a little bit of our secret sauce today. So I look at the world, there are two main vertical stack that you can invest in today's world, okay? It's evolving towards the process part. One, obviously, on the training side, right? So we almost don't touch anything on the training side other than very high on the stack. On the training side, you have very expensive ASICs, or soon it's going to be kind of these kind of training kind of cloud. And then you have businesses like OpenAI that they're training very large set of parameters into the model itself, and they're providing specific products on top, whether it's video-based or it's voice-based or it's text-based. And then people will imagine other type of applications that would be sitting on top. So eventually, process application will be sitting on top of that too. The problem that I think I struggle with that is, this is a stack that's very difficult to make direct revenue out of. Who is actually occupying that space? It's OpenAI, but OpenAI is 49% owned by Microsoft, right? And 75% of the future profit is going to go to Microsoft. So you kind of have to think they and Microsoft is kind of one of the same in that case. And I think Satya has made it very, very clear. They said this is their opportunity to give Google an extremely tough time because they don't have any advertisement revenue, right? So they've thrown the kitchen sink at it. How would they actually monetize this? It's easy for them. They'll put the neural network into Windows, and they already said they're going to do that, right? And soon we will have local training chips and inference chip on the computer itself. They will put it obviously into Microsoft Office, right? And the rest of the Microsoft Teams. And that will make perfect sense. I mean, it's already happening. You will see agents and you will see AI assistants into almost everything that we do, and as we are creating presentations or writing a document, all that kind of stuff. That's how they will monetize. Very hard for, I think, outside companies without these kind of monopolistic position to try to monetize anything. The much more interesting thing, I think, is really for the rest of the world to invest in. This is kind of like early days, is inference. So one thing is to train the model. The much more interesting thing is to be able to fetch, and this will be like creating the sensation as if we're thinking like human. So we derive and instantly give you an answer, except it's a very, very fast human, right? It may not be smarter than a human, but very fast. So on the inference stack, so everyone's rushing into that space. This will be cheaper, number one. Number two, now you can now have direct, impactful revenue generated from every piece of software sitting on top. One will be the operations of these inferences stack itself, right? How do you serve the model, for example? Security, how do you authorize who, can go to which fetch itself, right? The whole traditional OAuth, all that kind of stuff, now will have to be reinvented for this. We have no development tool. So generally, when somebody develops an applications, they think right now mostly we think of a form, right? So we start with a form, we put fields, and then we put interaction of the forms. That's how our application gets done. In the future, it won't be the case. So we need those configurations and those tools to be available. And then all of the management tools. Those are all the things that have to be done, right? And we now accepted one thing, which is very interesting. For the past, I would say, since the late 2000s, we've been focused on everything moving onto the cloud. What's the thing that I hear the most lately? Things are moving back to be on-prem because they don't know, there's no way to protect the data, right? Which is, data is the new gold, right? Data is the new oil. So the banks, the telcos are not willing to take the risk, those data, training data, getting out to anybody. So they're bringing back the data center competency. So now on-prem software is back in vogue. So now we need data center operations and also on-prem software expertise. That's another opportunity. So I think the infant stack is the most interesting. And then ultimately will be all those AI-enabled applications. So if you ask me, without a doubt, we will see a new Salesforce.com. Whether Salesforce.com themselves will reinvent themselves or somebody will reinvent them, it's coming. I think this time around, for sure, we will see a new SAP. I think it's been almost 50 years people waiting to see a new SAP. Once you set the bill of material inside SAP, you're not movable. We will see flexibility in the future, and the Workday and everything else that we have historically see on that level, we'll see a whole different types of application. So the next 10 years is going to be a free-for-all of development, I think. But I'm going to focus on the infant stack.
It seems like you portrayed a doomsday for SAP and sales. Have you talked to these people, and what's their response to your thesis?
I think they are very well aware, right? I mean, I think we have kind of two general reactions in the world, right? One will be overreactions. We think AGI is imminent, so there are people pushing the choir and say human existence may be in jeopardy because AI is going to be smarter than the human. I actually don't believe that. Okay, based on what I actually am looking at, is like nothing is actually smarter than human. It's definitely fast, right? It definitely has very good memory. As I age, I envy how when you have if the AI can actually train every information that I have on my hand, all my old email, all of my old Slack, all of my old Discord, all of my old Telegram, all of my old Signal and iMessage. It certainly will remember things better than I do, right? All the files I have. But I hope, okay, and I honestly don't believe that AI will be smarter than human anytime soon. However, it's without a doubt, the impact of how AI will be helping us to do mundane tasks and mutating the way that we do a task because we have to do mundane tasks now. In the future, we don't. That's exciting. And you can assume the application will be written so long ago, even a new one, even Salesforce is over 20 years old. They're all form-based. So in a new world order, this is all going to be new. So there's a chance that they've been investing in AI for a long time. They're probably the most likely candidate to have a shot in kind of reinventing themselves. The really old company will have a much harder time.
Okay, thank you. Any final question, for this section from the audience? Okay, yeah.
Alfred, I have a question about what you just mentioned about SAP and Salesforce. So in this AI era, one of the advantages of those big companies has is the data. So they have lots of customer data, proprietary data. So for newcomers, they have a natural disadvantage. Without data, they cannot develop a good, strong model. So I want to understand more your thoughts. What is the opportunity for the new startups in order to help compete with those?
Will new AI companies outcompete incumbents with data disadvantages?
I think this is a very good point. For a corporation has a very distinct way of dealing with data, right? I used to call it an American garage. So if you've seen people when they open up the garage, it's packed with stuff inside. You often wonder, for sure, the car cannot get inside. But they're not retrieving anything from the garage either. I think that's explain how corporate data actually works. We hoarded everything because this is for compliance reasons, for fear that the data actually will be useful in some way. But we hardly ever use anything from that. I'm not saying that if you were able to take all of Salesforce's data and train it, it won't be helpful for our cost. It will be. But we also remember the error. Remember how much data that Facebook started with? Nothing. You just look at Facebook started in 2008. You look at it in just the last short 16 years, what Facebook had accumulated, 1 some billion users, and enormous amount of data is because people want to put the data in. So if there's a will, there's a way. So I think if the application is so useful, people will find a way to put their records back in it. There are tons of people who will be building interfaces. By the way, that data in Salesforce, when you subscribe to it, is owned by the user. It's not owned by Salesforce. They have a distinct advantage that they could have built inferences using this. I'm sure they're doing it. But if there's a new application, an incumbent, that's going to be providing the level of efficiency is going to be so great, I think they can overcome the data issue. Despite my belief that data is really the most important thing at the end of the day, obviously they're in the best position to reinvent themselves. But in the event that actually if the productivity is increased so much, I think people will forego some of the historical data or do some retraining and relearning. If you look at like the training itself, the ASICs all the way up is getting cheaper by the day. The competitions are all rolling in very quickly. Their claims, Intel just made a claim, their new product their chip is going to be 3 times faster than H100. I'm sure that NVIDIA will have a new thing that's going to be 10 times faster. That's all good news for us, right? Because then that means the training time is going to continue to be compressed. So the amount of data we can feed into the thing to train will take shorter time. So I'm going to bet on the new invention anytime over the legacy advantage. I tell you, I'm almost in shock. The number of companies that are being created per day. And I'm just looking at the amount of my top of the funnel, which is the most crucial part of the venture business, is how many companies are you seeing? The only way to be able to pick the gems out of an ocean of great idea is to see as many companies as humanly possible. Right now, it's infinite. I won't be able to see them all. I would say, I think the week before last, I think we saw 82 companies in a single week. And this is a small firm. So I can only imagine how many companies Sequoia is seeing, or Andreessen is seeing, Greylock is seeing, Lightspeed is seeing, Bessemer is seeing. I think it's like enormous. This is like nothing compared to anything, by the way, my entire journey in computer science that I've ever seen. So, because we now can do things we didn't imagine is doable. So there may be people that are skeptical about AI and say, this may be a fad and it's temporary phenomenon. We have a big bubble will burst and it'll go away. It's not going to go away. The clock would never be dialed back. Now, the bubble may burst, right? Very similar to the dot-com bubble has bursted. But then you see survivors. And I don't know, maybe some of you are not old enough. I'm certainly old enough that I have customers looking at my face and say, Alfred, don't waste your time because this is JP Morgan. We never ever would do business on the web. Look what happened. So now, this time they're not saying that. They say, we definitely will be using AI. That's the thing that they'll be saying. So I think without a doubt, this is not going to stop. But the low-hanging fruit, if you're a little startup, right, you're not going to say, I'm going to build a full CRM suite to replace this huge set of software that Salesforce has or Workday have or any of the large company have. You'll be building things where it's going to make the most impact and people will be most interested. You chip it away. But that's normally is how it works, right? So slowly you chip it away enough, they will die. That's how mainframe software died. It's in the beginning, when people first have distributed software, client server, they didn't think that was going to go away. Anyone using a mainframe animal in a dumb terminal is all gone. So everything takes longer than we think, but I'm very confident. This chipping is like, I'm seeing like almost like a woodpecker. Like all I can hear in every call is packing on that wood constantly, is packing it away pretty good. So I think this will be a very exciting time. And one other thing I didn't mention, sometimes people ask me, they say, well, why do you think, I think this is actually going to be one of the questions you'll be asking me. I'm going to jump ahead, Roger, for a second. Well, why do you think BEA was successful? I said, well, I would say actually the biggest contributor was timing. If it wasn't because we had the web era and we had sufficient kind of like foresight to look at this is going to be very impactful, and we took advantage of what we had and then roll into it and pivot into it, we wouldn't be the company. We would grow revenue from $100 million to $1 billion in 6 quarters. That was not because of us. That was because there was a sucking sound in the marketplace. They want it. And I think the same thing is exactly happening. We want it. I'm already seeing applications like we have one company, they're doing voice AI. They train their own model called Play. It's a remarkable software. Yeah, what they have done is now they can actually not just training the voice to replicate somebody in a call center. They can replicate, the emotion, They can read the emotion. They can read the accent and answer back in a language that's native to the person they call in. They'll be able to look in the vast context because they look up data faster than anyone and give a proper answer back to the person. They understand what customer satisfaction is. Actually, it turned out the human didn't, right? That they were supposed to know. They didn't. And they insert them into a room full of real agents, actually call center agents. And those agents could not tell that's not human. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4 replacements soon, this is all going to be replaced. What does that mean? Direct cash to bottom line. This is EBITDA, change for every one of these call centers that you make it more efficient. I don't think human needs to do those jobs. Doesn't mean that those people don't need jobs. They will find other jobs. But this is how impactful this will be. So to me, it's chipping away very, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for watching.